Hi, my name's Wyatt Montalongo, and my presentation is going to be on the French Revolution's lasting impact on cuisine. So, there were hunger and bread shortages that helped spark the revolution. The revolution converted cuisine from an aristocratic entitlement into a national cultural identity. So, in the beginning, only rich people in France were eating cuisine. So I'll explain it right here. Before the revolution, uh, food and class divide. So in aristocracy, it involved multi-course feasts at Versailles, and peasants they mostly relied on a poor diet of bread, soup, and root vegetables to survive. So food became a symbol of inequality. As you can see in the photos, you had like the rich and wealthy eating, you know, very expensive meals, and on the bottom, compared to poor people just eating and sharing and fighting over bread and root vegetables. So the revolution and collapse of aristocratic dining, um, nobles ran away or executed. So chefs lost financial support. Chefs didn't really have you know um, wealthy people paying for them to cook at the big meals that they were having. So eventually, the chefs decided to open their own restaurants in Paris, and as a result of that, public dining culture became like more normalized. And in the photo, you can see, you know, people starting to go to restaurants. It wasn't that expensive since the chefs opened their own uh, locations for food. Alright, so bread, riots, and hunger. Um, bread, wheat. It was life for most of France. It was a huge part of the French diet. Um, you know, so when the price increased, it caused people to riot and to protest, and food became a symbol of inequality. Um, bread became really expensive, so people that could barely afford it weren't able to get their hands on it. So it caused frustration. It caused them to rebel, and the riots was was the cause of that. People get hungry, they're gonna rebel. The democratization of cuisine. The middle class retrieved entry to refined cooking. Social dining became normal, not just for the wealthy. Restaurants equated to new cultural institutions. Um, so the middle class, they weren't like the most wealthiest people. They're like in the middle, but they had access to refined cooking, not just for the wealthy anymore. Codification and haute cuisine. Um, Chefs like Karami standardized recipes. Uh, he had this book. or not a book, but he had like very famous recipes in France that essentially laid the groundwork for you know the haute cuisine, which is like high end type of cuisine, and later Escoffier's refinements. So on the left, you can see Karami, someone that cooked for kings. You make the king happy. You become a um, important person if you make the king happy and feed him well, or he's fed well because of your amazing food that you make. So, cuisine nationale. Regional dishes had emerged into nationwide cuisine. Some examples are wine, cheese, and bread, which were, symbols of France. So basically, what um, these bullet points are is, the dishes that were created by important people like the chef that I had just talked about in the earlier slide. The food that he was making, that his recipes became like mainstream in France, and it became nationwide. It became normal to have those meals, cooked. And on the map right here, you can see, wine, cheese, and bread were an important part in the French culture. Present legacy. Um, yeah, France is the culinary capital of the world. Um, it's the cafe culture and fine dining. Many restaurants throughout different countries trace roots to Revolution era Paris. That last bullet is very iconic. Um, you know, when you have other countries around the world having their restaurant blueprint based off of one certain country, it really defines a whole legacy. One country inspired many. And I thought that was pretty interesting. Conclusion: the revolution shaped cuisine permanently. Food moved from exclusive to the rich to shared cultural identity. Cuisine became part of France's cultural DNA. When people think of cheese, bread, and wine, they're gonna correlate that with France and French people. And yeah, that's it for my presentation. Thank you for watching.